Hey, everybody. On the Run with Beards and Dunn is back for episode Beards. What is it? 37, I think it is.
Are we really done? Up
I
to
can't.
37? Holy cow, this has been fun, though, I tell you.
It is. It seems like we did a couple of them, and it's like I can't even imagine how many of these we'll possibly be able to do. And now, as we kind of gotten into it, we're really enjoying visiting with people from our past, especially running related people from our past. And today we got a good one. And I'm going to
Oh
go
my
ahead and introduce our
gosh.
guest, if that's okay. And then I know Beards might have an anecdote or two to share, but our guest today is Mr. Richard or Rich Benyo, Benyo. And rather than waste a lot of time reading, Rich is a writer, an author. He's also a runner. He's a husband. His wife is an outstanding runner as well, Rhonda Provost. And Rich and I have known each other since about 2000, I think, a little after 2001, 2002, at the first Dick Beardsley Marathon Training Camp. Dick hosted a camp for runners that wanted to be marathoners or were marathoners, wanted to get faster. And Dick sat out and tried to come up with a list of what he would call coaches to help the participants at this camp become better runners. And, I was so honored to be included in this list. But one of the participants was Mr. Rich Benyo. And we're going to talk about why, and Dick will share why Rich was on that first camp and it was at every camp. I think we had about 12 or 13 of the darn things and over the years. And that's when I got to meet Rich and just kind of really came to appreciate him even more and more. I only knew of him by his reputation, and it was outstanding. As I think one of my highlights, was the fact that for Rich was the editor of Runner's World magazine for a number of years, and he can kind of share how that all evolved, and also for his experience as a runner. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Death Valley or the Badwater 135, but it's one of these events that sane people just shake their heads and go, I can't understand why anybody would do such a thing, run 135 miles across the Mojave Desert. Well, Rich not only did that, he turned around and then ran back, did a double crossing, I think twice. Anyway, and so we'll get into that a little bit, but Rich Benyo is our guest today. And go to richbenyo.com and read, please do, his bio. And you can get some of his background. A lot of his writings are listed there. I think all of his writings from his college days in the 60s up to today, because he's a prolific writer, still writing to this day. And so I'm excited. Dick, you got anything you want to share about Rich Benyo before we start visiting with him?
Well, there's a lot of things, but some that I probably shouldn't mention on our podcast. But I got to tell you this, so I've known Rich for a long time, and when I battled with the addiction back in the mid '90s to the painkillers, and it became quite public because of the runner I once was and everything. And I used to go, before that I'd go out to a lot of marathons and speak at them and other running events. And when that all happened, I kind of not didn't kind of it was kind of they just kind of dried up. And then I believe it was the March of 1997. Rich, who and David Hill were the race directors of the Napa Valley Marathon, which I had fortunate to have won it 10 years before in 1987, and they were the first race that after all that dealing with that stuff, that they brought me back in. And it was such an emotional time for me to see Rich and Dave Hill and Joe Henderson and Rhonda and all those folks. And it really they really maybe stuck out their neck a little bit to bring me back into the fold again. But that's something I'll appreciate and remember for the rest of my life. So, Rich, it is a pleasure to have you on, and I'm telling you, this is going to be fun, I think.
I told Rich before we came on, we might give him 3 or 4 minutes to talk during our 45-minute episode. And so I think his time's almost come up. So, Rich, what we usually do is kind of, if you'd be willing, because a little bit of your growing up, I know you wrote a book, and I can't remember the name of it. Jim Thorpe Never Slept Here. Was that the name of it?
That is correct.
I love that book. I have it, and somewhere we moved and it's in a box. But it's your childhood, which I just, when I read it, you either laugh or cry or you do both. It was, and then
I know I want to hear about this too.
Yeah, share a little bit about your upbringing, and then running. Getting into high school, college, post college. give us the story, the Rich Benyo story. You got 3 or 4 minutes. Go.
Okay. I have 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, I'll try to keep it short. But I grew up in central eastern Pennsylvania in a town called East Mock Chunk, on the one side of the Lehigh River, and Mock Chunk was on the other side. And they had been important coal towns in the 1880s and 1890s, but they were had gone downhill over the years because coal was no longer important. So we were kind of like the little rascals. It was one of those kind of situations. Nobody had a lot of bucks, but our gang, our South Street gang, had a lot of fun terrorizing the animals and the other kids in the neighborhood. I went in to have my tonsils done when I was 5 years old, and while I was under anesthetic, I woke up and they had to put me back under, and as a result, I developed a stuttering problem, so I became very good at that. I also became very good at outrunning guys who were older and tougher than I was, so that's kind of how I got into running at that point. In 1954, at the time Jim Thorpe died, the kind of Chamber of Commerce in Mock Chunk and East Mock Chunk brought his body to Jim Thorpe and combined the two towns and changed them from East Mock Chunk and Mock Chunk into Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania. So even though Jim Thorpe had been to Pennsylvania, he went to college at Carlisle, but he had never been to Mock Chunk and East Mock Chunk, so that's where the title of the book came from. So it was fun growing up in the sense that the east side of town was mostly German and Slovak, and the Mock Chunk side was Irish, and nobody had guns in those days. At least they didn't shoot each other, but boy, the gang would try to bushwhack each other and chase each other all over town. So I ended up being alive by actually out running a lot of the Irish kids. And by the way, happy Thanksgiving Day to all of my old Irish friends.
Very good.
That's right.
So I remember there's just so many parts of that book that made me I had a pretty rural upbringing, and so when you talked about, I remember you guys played in the dump. The dump was like close, yeah. And it was like your playground was the dump.
Well, even worse than that, the local stream that ran by our house on the east side of South Street had terrible stuff flowing into it, so it was actually called Ruddle's Run, but everybody called it the I probably should not say this, but the Shit Creek.
Shit Creek. They have a movie about that. Yeah. I love it. Oh, I tell you, and Rich, your humble upbringing, it just, to look at where you're at, I sometimes shake my head. I'm retired now, and Dick's, I don't know if he claims he's still working, but
hey,
fishing.
Come on.
I know. And I know
working for Dick.
Yeah, that's
good move.
But you're out in Santa Rosa now. Is that north of the Bay Area?
Yes, it is.
And I really want to get out there, and I'm going to. Is there still an invitation if a guy wanders to your front door, you won't shoot him?
Especially if he comes on a bike that is not electrified.
Oh no! All right, we're not going to go into that. I had a T-shirt once that said "e-bikes like regular bikes, but way cooler," and Rich commented, "No, they're not," or something to that effect.
Not boy, Rich.
Yeah, he put me in my place. It's like I love that.
So, Rich.
Yeah, go ahead, Dick.
Well, I was just going to say, I've always known Rich as, the runner, the author about, running books, things like that. But Rich, before you kind of were doing stuff with Runner's World, weren't you the editor or wrote a bunch of things for like Stock Car Digest or something like that?
Yeah, from after I got out of college, I worked at the local newspaper for 4.5 years, and then I got a job as the editor of Stock Car Racing magazine out of Alexandria, and I worked there for 4.5 years before I went to Runner's World on the West Coast. So I spent 4.5 years following NASCAR.
Wow.
And doing articles about that. So I've had a rather varied career.
Well, racing is racing.
Yeah. So Rich, did they ever let you get behind the wheel of a stock car or ride with one of the drivers?
When I was doing an article on Pocono International, they had the stock cars in there, and the event got rained out, so they had some of the stock cars hang around to take journalists out on the track. So I had a helmet and a cushion from their PR office that I hung down to the roll bars, and the driver took us around the track at about 180 miles an hour.
Oh my gosh!
What was it like?
It was. I did not have a bowel movement for 5 days after.
I thought you were going to say you had one when you hit the first curve.
I should have. It would have been my last one.
The sphincter was tight. So anyway.
It slammed shut.
So it really does put it, people look at NASCAR. I was kind of a fan for a while there during those Jeff Gordon years before.
I was too for a while.
Yeah, I liked, you either loved him or hated him. And then Jimmy Johnson came along, and he kind of grew on me a little bit. I didn't like him at first, but, and it's kind of amazing how people, I don't know why it is. Maybe it's just we're envious of that, a race car driver, maybe all boys down inside. It's like, what a dream job, and they make it, all you gotta do is turn left and put your foot on the gas, man, and it's like, right. Yeah. Good luck. Give that a shot.
So Rich, so Rich, after the stock car, journalism that you were doing, then you went to Runner's World, and at the time they were located in Mountain View, California, correct?
That is correct. Yeah.
So did you have an office there, or how did that all work?
They had an office there. Well, the magazine started out in Kansas. Bob Anderson started it in his bedroom. It came out twice a year and cost, I think, 50 cents. And in 1970, he moved it to California and hired Joe Henderson as the editor. And by the time I got there in 1977, it was in that gigantic growth period where it went from about 18,000 circulation to about 125,000 in a 2-year period. It just kept going. So Bob and Joe were looking to hire people as fast as they could to take up some of the slack. So I happened to be hired there at that very interesting time when the entire sport was exploding. Everybody was getting into it, and there were not a lot of places they could get articles and so forth. So the magazine was just going through a gigantic growth spurt. So that was exciting. Of course, when you get out there and get around all of those people, everybody's talking marathoning. So I went from getting back into running when I started working there in the summer of 77, and I ran my first marathon in spring of 78, and I had no idea what I was doing. It was exciting. It was
so to back up, you ran college cross country, correct?
Correct, yeah.
And no high school though? Did they even have such a thing, or track, or?
They did not have high school track or cross country. They did race where I did the longest event, which was half a mile. Although it was actually more than half a mile because our field was full of puddles and dumps and stuff that you had to run around and through trees and everything. So we basically didn't have anything other than spending all of our spare time out in the woods.
All right. So would you say, so racing wasn't the allure, it was just kind of a natural thing you've evolved into, and then as you got into college, here's an opportunity to have some fun running with a bunch of guys?
I took part in my freshman year in what was an intramural cross country meet, and one of the guys in the meet also happened to be on the cross country team, so I was
recruited
into joining the cross country team. So that was fun. It's like one of those things you guys realize it's hard to find a long distance runner who is some kind of a jerk. I mean, they all have their distinct personalities, but they're welcoming and they're a lot of fun, and you tell a lot of stories and beat up on each other out there. But they're just an awful nice bunch of people, kind of like you two.
Oh boy, we're not going to soften up on you just because of that.
No.
So, but so after college, were you still running just for the joy of running, or did you kind of take a break, or how before Runner's World?
Well, after college, at the paper I was working at, I was working 70, 80 hours a week and didn't get much chance to get out there to work out. The other editor and I did put an event on called the Switchback Scamper. But other than that, I just began adding pounds, and then once I went to stock car racing, I just added more pounds. So I reached 207 pounds.
Oh, way, okay.
In 1976, and then when Bob Anderson called and we discussed going to work out there at Runner's World, I began working out again, and I found out that one of the best things to do is to rather than have a Roy Rogers steak sandwich over lunch, is have an apple and just go out and take a walk, and eventually the pounds came off. So one of the typical process, I think, of a lot of people at that era.
Right.
Yeah.
They just decided, I'm getting old, I'm getting fat, and I don't like it. So the simplest thing and the cheapest thing is just get my sorry ass out there and a couple miles.
What was your fighting weight? What'd you get down to, when you were pretty fit? Do you remember?
162.
Okay, so from 207 down to 162. And
wow. So Rich, you ran in cross country in college, and then afterwards and ran your first marathon. Okay, so 26.2 miles is pretty daunting for 99.9% of the people. But for you, it must have seemed like a walk in the park, because eventually you got up to doing these ultra marathons and in places that, not even a dead snake can stay alive in. So tell us kind of how you got involved in this ultra marathoning, and especially in a area that's what many consider the hottest place on earth.
It actually does have the reputation of the hottest place on earth. Everybody keeps talking about global warming right now. Furnace Creek in Death Valley hit 134 degrees in the shade back in 1913.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it qualified as the hottest place on Earth over the last probably couple of centuries. So what happened with that was my grandfather and I used to watch cowboy films on Saturday afternoons at his house. I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I'd go over there. We'd watch double features. Hopalong Cassidy, Bob Steele.
I watched them too. I loved them.
Yeah, and my grandfather even though he never got west of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, he just loved the Western. So we'd watch things like Death Valley Days and all that stuff. And when I moved to California, I thought, well, now that I'm out here, I should look into going to some of these places where the cowboys were. And a lot of the cowboy films were shot in the little town of Lone Pine in California, which is the town between Death Valley and Mount Whitney. So,
Ah.
After I left Runner's World, I was the running and fitness columnist at the San Francisco Chronicle, and we got a call one day from these two guys who were the fifth and sixth people to run from Badwater in the bottom of Death Valley to the top of Mount Whitney. So I interviewed them and wrote a three-part article on them. That was Tom Crawford and Mike Whitwer, and they decided to have a party the summer after their event, and they invited all these people. And a guy by the name of Kenneth Crutchlow, who was from England and was somewhat of an eccentric. He'd do all kinds of events without even training. He was one of the ones who actually came up with the current Death Valley course. The old course used to run from southern Death Valley and Shoshone to Scotty's Castle, but he noticed the anomaly that Badwater was the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere and the hottest place on Earth, and a mere 140 some miles away was Mount Whitney, which was the tallest peak in the lower 48, and he happened to fall in the same county. So his theory was, well, why run from north to south, run from east to west, go from Death Valley to the top of Mount Whitney? So he heard that Crawford and Whitwer had done this. So he came over during the party and threw out a challenge to them to do a USA versus UK race on the course the following year. That was 1987. So they did that. So I went along and wrote more articles on it. And the year anniversary after that, Tom Crawford had a picnic at his house with all the people who had been involved in it, and we had a couple of too many beers, and we were talking about and saying that the course is almost 150 miles from the lowest to the highest, but in order to get back from the peak, you have to hike down 13 miles to the parking lot. You can't drive up to the top of Whitney. So Crawford and I said, well, okay, if you do the course and you have to come partway down again, why don't we just keep going? And
oh my gosh!
And the next day he called and he said, did we talk about going out to Death Valley next year and being the first people to do the out and back? And I said, yeah. And he said, I actually got some phone calls from some of the people that were there that they actually overheard us, so now we have to do it. So
wow.
In 1989, Crawford and I went from Badwater in Death Valley to the top of Mount Whitney, and then turned around and came back. And people told us we were going to die, and we figured if we could teach our bodies to process liquids rather than just drinking a lot of them and having them pile up in the stomach and so forth, if we could process, we could probably survive. So we went on to a 90-day process of going out at high noon, getting a workout in, coming back to a hot box that we had heated up to 165 degrees, had a couple of gallons of water in there, and would exercise using a piece of firewood. So we kept our heart rate up, and we we taught our body to process water, which you would think that the main thing is so you don't think it's too hot out there, but the point was to actually have the water processed through the kidneys and be urinated out rather than it piling up and you basically getting loaded. So our plan worked, and then we just kept going back, which is not real right.
Three times, correct?
Yeah. The second time in 1991, I got almost to the end and developed a leg problem, so I decided I had to come back in 1992 and do it again, which I did it again, and temperatures getting back into the valley went up to 128 degrees, and it was. By the time I got done with that, I said, I have had it. I don't have to do it again.
Now, for anybody listening to this, let's just kind of put this in perspective. It's about 100. Now, there's Google Badwater 135. There's YouTube videos, and how many people every year attempt this? I want to say hundreds. And there's
well, the thing with the Badwater 135 when we were doing it, there weren't any permits that you would need to go from Whitney Portal at 8,000 feet up to the peak, which is 14,494 feet. But now there are now you need permits, so the race only goes to the portal. It doesn't at about 8,000 feet. It doesn't go up to the top anymore. So back in the 80s and 90s, when Tom and I were doing it, you could just go up to the peak and turn around and come back down. So what we were doing was about 147 miles.
One way.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you do the 147 back.
Right. So, Rich, how long are we talking? How many days for the 300 did it take you and Tom to do that?
Well, the first when Tom and I did it in 1989, Tom did it in around 5.5 days. I did it in about 6.5.
That's amazing. Yeah, I'm trying to do the math in my head. It's bad enough to do that kind of distance under the best of conditions.
Right.
Most people wouldn't even think of doing it under the best of conditions, but in Death Valley. And I'm intrigued that, you're back in the late 80s, you're training, you had to invent this basically on your own. I can't imagine there were any experts in the field.
Yeah, because by the time Tom Crawford and Mike Whitwer did it their first time in I believe it was 85, there had been only four people before them who had done it. Now it's very common. As you pointed out, they have the Badwater 135 there every year, which brings people in from all over the world.
Right.
And they have brought the times down terrifically, and they do a great job. And the event, because of the national park being involved, they can only have about 90 people each year. And they do them in waves every couple of hours. They send 30 out, and they wait a couple of hours and send 30 more out, and so forth, in order to not get the road clouded up, because it's a very small 2-lane highway. But it's quite the international event. So it is in Minnesota. But
hey, but Rich, I got to ask you this. So when you're running on pavement in that hot of weather, I mean, did your shoes ever start almost melting or anything?
Yeah, kind of. The temperature on the asphalt there can get up to about 190 or 200.
Jiminy Christmas.
So what we learned to do was run out on the white stripe on the edge, which wasn't quite as hot.
I'm sure that helped a lot.
It was only 120.
Every degree helps out there, you know.
Now,
I suppose.
what, I got to ask, well, how old were you in '89? I can't do the math in my head.
I was in my mid 30s, I guess.
Okay. And so, that
I
is,
could have known better.
no, you didn't. Well, it's inspiring. I remember seeing some video footage, and I don't know if it was through you or there's some video. I remember there's some duct tape involved. Basically, didn't you have to duct tape your feet together?
What we did was braid that I forget what it's called, benzene or whatever on our feet, and then put duct tape on in order to avoid getting blisters. But we invented a whole bunch of crazy things because, as you guys recall, in those days there were not a lot of aids for doing events like that. There were,
Right.
They had just come out with Spenco and things like that around that point. But these days they have all kind of salves and oils and everything, and all kind of special bandages and so forth. But in those days, duct tape helps in just about everything. I mean, it's totally functional.
And Rich, so you're doing the first two guys doing this Death Valley 300, first ever attempt at it. Did you get a lot of media following this and seeing how crazy you guys were to try this?
Not really.
It was too hot for them in their air-conditioned cars to follow you.
Yeah. They did not want to be out there. We had talked to some people, and we got a bit of coverage, but it wasn't something we actually pumped up a whole lot because it's kind of a special place out there, and it's a very personal thing. And although these days it does have a lot of coverage when they have the events out there, in those days we just kept kind of low key with the whole thing.
So you guys were the first to do it. How many have done the double? And I know Rhonda, your wife, did the double. How many women have done the double?
Well, Rhonda was the first female to do it. She did it in 1995. She thought that Tom and I were having such a great time.
Insanity sounds. It sounds like it's you can spread it. I don't know.
Yeah, spread the fun around. Yeah, I haven't kept up with the number, although there's probably like 30, 40 people who have done the out and back at this point. There was one guy, Marshall Ulrich, who did a quad.
Oh my gosh.
He did a double out and back.
I'm not even going to comment. Okay. Well, I have to admit this. I knew about your history, Rich, when you came out to the running camp, and it was amazing to me, and you didn't disappoint when I got to finally meet you, because I think we were all, Dick's. There's something about, I think Bill Rogers said one time, he's getting ready for Boston, and he was training like 140 miles a week, and it was predicted to be a hot Boston, and it was like, turn up the heat, turn up the heat, turn up the heat. He wanted it to train in the heat so he'd be ready for race day. And he said something about, he goes, I think all endurance athletes or something about that have a suicidal tendency in them or something like that. It's like, you want to see where the limit is.
Right, exactly.
And you don't know, because how many of us ever go there? And so, I'm going to talk about me because that's what I like to do. And I'm wearing my shirt. I don't know if you guys can see that, but it says Race Across America. And after meeting Rich and Rhonda and of course Dick and getting to know them and hearing these kind of stories, I had my own little, I don't know, what would you call it, Rich, adventure into insanity with this Race Across America. And it's a 3,000-mile race across the United States, and you got 12 days to do it. And so I had to put together a team, and the first people I wanted on my team, was Dick Beardsley, because he was there to be my cheerleader, motivational inspiration, because he does that for me. You and Rhonda were probably the second and third. Well, my wife, and okay, I have to put her in there too. But you guys were on there because of your experience and because
no kidding,
you've been to that place. And yeah.
Yeah, we kind of like to support people who are a little wacky, and certainly in that regard, because I have always admired people who are good cyclists, because I'm pretty terrible. I can fall over on a tricycle. So
Well, and so I made the attempt, and you and Rhonda were so gracious to share of your time and expertise, and we're a part of that. And I kind of I look back with 2020 vision now, and I didn't complete the event that first year, and I had to fall out, and for I can make multiple excuses, but the preparation cannot be understated physically. But probably also the psychological preparation, which is really until you're out there, you really don't know what you're going to face. And so I was able to go back in that second year and do that race across the West, and did that and completed it, kind of to solve a little salve on the wound. But everything you were talking about with the fluid processing, that really struck to me, because I really struggled with that. And I
Yeah,
wish I
you got
would.
bloated, I
Oh,
remember, a
I
number of
I
times
gained
done.
20 pounds, and it all went right to my abdomen. I looked like it was in my third trimester, and when the event ended, I got through it. I went to the emergency room because I was having trouble breathing, and the emergency room doctor, he said, "Oh, you're one of those cyclists," because we were in Durango, Colorado, which the race goes through every year. And he goes, "We get you guys in here every year, for one thing or another." And I told him, I said, "I've gained 20 pounds. I was 160. I'm 180." And I just rode my bike 860 miles. I should be like low. And he says, "Yeah, you're third spacing, I guess is the term they use." And he goes, "You going? When are you going home?" I said, "Tomorrow." And I go, "Are you going to give me like a diuretic or something?" He goes, "Nah, because we don't want that fluid out too quick, because it'll take all your potassium and a lot of stuff with it. And so you just need to let nature run its course. But if you're home in 24 to 36 hours and it hasn't begun to correct itself, you need to call your doctor." Well, Rich, do I need to tell you what happened within about 24 hours? I couldn't go to bed at night that first night, because about every 20 to 30 minutes, I was having to flush the toilet for before I got this done, because it was filling up to the anyway. Usually when you get up in the middle of the night and you have to go pee, it's like, "Oh, son of a gun." I'd get up and go, "Yes, yes," and I'd run in there, and and then that 20 pounds came off within about 2 or 3 days. It was just amazing. And so I kind of blame you, or no, I don't blame you, but you were an inspiration, and I have no what's the word I'm looking for? No regrets whatsoever. If you have a goal and you don't pursue it, and I know Dick speaks of this a lot, you owe it to yourself. You don't have to do it for anybody but yourself. And if you fail mightily in a great effort, keep your head up
But
and move
done.
forward.
And we've talked about this too. It's the only time you fail is when you don't
Try.
attempt something you've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Whether you get to from point A to point B or not, the fact that you did that, and
Oh yeah.
things happen, and it is what it is. But I mean, for Rich to do
Oh.
the 300 times.
Yes. And so, Rich, you've inspired me. We're going to go back to Ram. My wife and my kids, who all went with me, they said, "Never again." They go, "You do whatever you want. You're going to have to hire a crew." And I do want to. And I told Dick this story, and he didn't know it. But Rich, you and Rhonda were so gracious, and I think as you couldn't go the whole way. You got me through the Mojave Desert. You got me into Utah, I think it was, and Avenue of the Giants. It was beautiful over there, and blah blah blah. And I remember, as you guys had at home, I needed to give you, I gave you like a $500 gift card for gas money and stuff. And I told Dick, Rich and Rhonda sent that back to me. They never took a dime of money from me. And I don't know what that, maybe the cost was several $100s out of your pocket, but I've always been very grateful. And I think that was just fantastic that
Well,
you were so
as
generous.
long as I've known Rich and Rhonda, it's all about giving back and stuff. And Rich, I got to tell you, one of the things I looked forward to for so many years was you were so kind to always bring me back for the Napa Valley Marathon. And then when you and David Hill decided to retire and whatnot, and I think the race got sold, and they don't, it was a time when I always look forward to seeing you and Rhonda and Joe and so many other people, and now they don't do that anymore. And I miss you and Rhonda. I really do. And I miss your wit and your humor. And it's running has changed a lot, Rich, since back then. Us old guys now, they don't you know, they don't bring us back near like they used to speak to the
Right.
runners. They say, well, you know, people nowadays don't even know who you old guys are, and it's kind of a sad deal, in my opinion.
Yeah, that was part of the reason that Dave and I retired from it, because the whole running scene, I guess you could say, evolved over the years. But I remember in the 70s when we had the big running boom, we were all proud of taking care of ourselves, not depending on a lot of other people, and just getting out there, putting the miles in. And then it evolved into, well, I can't run a marathon without having earphones on.
Right.
I have to have a place to stop every couple of miles, because I just can't keep going the whole distance at one time. And it just went from a sport where you took care of yourself and you were disciplined into something that you kind of depended on everybody to take care of you, which the sport isn't really about.
Yeah. Well
Yeah.
said. Well, you know, as you were talking there, Rich, I was thinking of the Berkeley Marathon, and I think it's in Tennessee. You've heard of that thing, haven't you? Where it's like
The
Barclay.
Barclay.
That you said they want you to take care of them. There ain't nobody taking care of you in that thing. And I tell you, the people who finish, and it's only a handful. I think there's maybe 15, 16 in like a 20-year history. Many years they have no finisher. It's like 125 miles in the wilderness, and it's like 5 loops. And if you finish one loop, you're considered pretty good. You know, that's pretty outstanding. The people that do second, third, fourth, and anybody who does a 5th loop, they go into this high echelon of Hall of Fame sort of thing. And it's kind of in the face of that. Everybody gets stuff medal. Everybody's a winner. Everybody's gets, you know, an aid station every mile and that sort of thing. And so we're kind of showing our age here a little bit. Before we get done here, Rich, bring us up to speed. You know, I've kind of lost track of it over the last 10 years. You know, I was thinking you were just kind of retired and kicking your feet up. If people don't know this, and if you go to his website, you'll learn you do the best Mark Twain probably.
Oh.
I saw a picture of you driving. It's on the cover of one of your books. It looks like Mark Twain driving down the street in a car, and I'm trying to remember the name of that book. But you do that is that part of an annual event that you're part of?
Yeah, that's one more of those wacko things that Tom Crawford and I got involved in. In fact, this August will be the 30th year we do what is called the Coyote Howl, where a men's historical group we belong to, E. Clampus Vitus, which is on the West Coast primarily. A friend of ours that happened to be in Death Valley at Stovepipe Wells, we went there for a 4x4, and he had a little too much port wine and began howling at the coyotes, and they began howling back at him. And Tom and I looked at each other and said, you know, I bet a bunch of guys in the middle of nowhere would love to howl like a coyote. So we put together the coyote howl, and what it is we get 99 guys in August to go out to the middle of nowhere. Sometimes we've been out on the Black Rock Desert. We've been all over the place to basically we do a tour of the area on Friday, and then Saturday we have the Coyote Howl, and I used to dress up as Mark Twain, and I would present the chapter 5 of his book Roughing It, which describes a coyote. And then once it got dark, we would have solo, duo, and trios where guys would get up and howl, and we'd give out prizes to.
What do Dick and I need to do to get an invite to this thing?
It's a private party, it sounds like.
What's that?
We're just very immature.
Oh, we're not immature enough? Oh my God. I don't know, Dick, if we should be part of this group. I think we'd fit right in, but you know.
Yeah. Well, hey, Rich. The 45 minutes went by so gosh darn quick. There's so many more things we need to talk about. We'll
Funny
have to do
stories.
this another time, but we can't thank you enough. You're one of a kind. Thank goodness for that. I mean, in a good way, and give our best to Rhonda for us. And I can't wait to see you guys. And we got to have a little reunion or something, right?
Yeah, that'd be wonderful.
Well, hey, if you're ever out in the Asheville area, I live near Asheville now, and well, Dick's coming out next month to visit, and I'll be up in.
Yeah.
We're going up to Bemidji in early September, and I know you're a prolific road warrior. You don't you. How many miles do you think you've put on a car? In a million. You've got to have a.
Well, my Suburban, which is a '96, it has 424,000 miles on it right now.
Well, it's good for half a mil. You know?
Yeah.
I'm aiming for 500,000. That's my big goal with that one.
Come to come to Bemidji in September. We'll go fishing with Dick.
Yeah, that would be a ball. But and we just want to say thanks to everybody for listening. And if you have any questions for us or comments about the show, you can contact us directly on our website at beardsanddenpod.com, or you can leave a comment on your Facebook, Instagram, or X, all at Beards and Dun Pod.
Yeah, and if you're watching on YouTube, make sure you comment or subscribe. We'd love to hear from you. Rich, we always kind of say, any final thoughts before we close?
Yeah, I love you guys. You're two wonderful fellows, and I always enjoy talking to you. And we've had some good times, and we aren't dead yet, so we have a chance to have a couple more good times before we're gone.
Oh, right on, bud. Right on.
All right, buddy. Take care, Rich.
Have a
Hi to
great day,
Rhonda.
bud.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.